I knew you were in the service. Thank you for your service, of course. But I didn't know all the other things you did after that.
Yeah, my 20s were a very formative decade, and that's the case for a lot of people.
Yeah.
It's kind of the trying decade, so to speak. So when I graduated at 22, I was immediately commissioned as a second lieutenant in the U.S. Army, but I got it at 26, and I was very happy and proud of my service, and I'm like, okay, my life's ahead of me, like, what's the next challenge? And so I chose law school. And that was a huge mistake in hindsight. You know, I come from a family of lawyers. My father is, my grandfather, but it wasn't for me. I quit after one semester, and it was brutal. And then I escaped to India for 4 months. And I was just like, I'm going to go find myself. I need to get out of this, let this settle down, let my parents recuperate a little bit. You know, they had told all their friends and family, like, John's going to be this big lawyer. So I escaped to India, come back. I tried corporate finance. I have always been passionate about finance, but corporate America just wasn't for me. In 18 months of that, I skipped out, tried commercial and residential real estate for over 4 years.
Oh, wow.
Both here in San Diego and then back in Maine. I was just trying to find myself, trying to find my place. And I loved consuming podcasts. I was obsessed with just listening to podcasts. It never crossed my mind for, you know, a while that I was going to produce a podcast. But it got to that point where I saw what was missing in the podcasting space. And that was a 7-day-week podcast that interviews inspiring, successful entrepreneurs. Because I wanted to listen to one every day. But, you know, people like, you know, our mutual friend Pat Flynn, he was doing a great podcast, but it was only twice a month at that time. I was able to push a fast forward button more than some other people will be able to, because again, I was 32 years old. I had really had successful careers financially up to that point, which allowed me to invest in a mentor, which was Jamie Tardy.
Right.
And so when I went to that first conference, I went with her. And that's where I was able to say, you know, like, John, like, what can we do for you? You know, hey, I just love 25 minutes of your time at some point in the next couple months. And I just got the yes. That was all that I got. So I hadn't even interviewed them yet. And I put my head down and I started reaching out to other entrepreneurs. And I said, and it was very honest and it was very true, and I said to other people, hey, you know, I'd love for you to be on my show, Entrepreneur on Fire. It's going to be a daily podcast. In the lineup, I have Pat Flynn. I have Michael Hyatt.
Did you have any idea the amount of work a 7-day podcast was going to be?
I did, because I had this mentor, Jamie, and I was in Cliff Ravenscraft's podcast mastermind. And they said, John, you're insane. It's going to be so much work. Don't do a 7-day-a-week podcast. Do a 1-day-a-week podcast. And I think this is really important, too, is that you need, as an entrepreneur, to really take the great feedback and the great advice from those who have come before you, from those who are mentoring you, but at the same time, you need to listen to your gut, to your intuition. I took so many great pieces of advice from both Cliff and Jamie and applied it to my business, but when it came to a 7-day-a-week podcast, my intuition, my gut was telling me it had to be that way. Like, that's what I was meant to create.
You can see why he started a movement called Entrepreneur on Fire. That whole interview was on fire. But I think there are a few key takeaways that we can take from John's interview. First, I think the name of his game is discipline. In his business, in his life, in his morning routine, I think we can learn a ton from how disciplined he is, and I think that was a key to his success. Number 2, invest. He invested in a mentor. Have you invested at all besides just your own sweat? Because if it's not important to you, then you won't invest, and you have to convince other people that it's important before they will invest. Number 3, did you hear when he snuck in that quote, "Fortune favors the bold"? I love that quote. What's awesome about what John did was that he pitched to have guests on his show before the show existed. He was out there talking about it and asking people to be on it with nothing to show, nothing in his hands at the time. And his answer to my question about that was that he knew he would follow through. So he was able to make those promises and ask those big asks because he knew he had the discipline and the perseverance to stick with it. Number 4, your audience is the key to your success. For John, at the beginning, building an audience was the key, and then later, listening to his audience and creating what they wanted was the key to such successful products. And I love that he listened to them and created something that they paid for before he started working on it. That is so genius. So if you're really listening to your audience, you can get them to invest in the idea before you execute your program or product for them. Lastly, listen to your heart. Take your mentor's advice, but at the end of the day, listen to your gut. Especially if, like John, you've done a lot of different things that maybe weren't the perfect fit for you, don't give up on your perfect fit. Imagine if John had given up before Entrepreneur on Fire. There would be thousands of hours of amazing advice for small business owners and entrepreneurs and hustlers out there that just wouldn't exist. So don't give up. And once you find what it is you're meant to do, you can learn so much from everything John told us today about your path to making it a success. For more great insights for your path to success, check out all the other articles and videos on success.com. And if you'd like to see the full interview with John, go to thepursuit.tv.